Boompop Coalition. This is Kevin March. Kevin March is a drummer. He's played with Guided by Voices and plays with the Dambuilders. I shudder to think, and there's the Rentals. He did a album with them, and lots of other bands that we're going to get into. Somewhat. He's also what would you call yourself? Kind of the head of School of Rock in Montclair, New Jersey. Is
I'm the
that
general manager, so
general manager? So that means
run the school from
so
as the general
yeah.
manager. I manage the whole school here on the ground. Yeah,
So that's kind of the head.
yeah.
Yeah. You're
I'm
good.
just not the owner. There's two owners.
Yeah.
Then there's me as the general manager.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're the guy that does all the string pulling and getting people to do whatever. Thank you for doing this. Okay, here's the deal. We're gonna get your story. We're gonna go back way to the beginning, like when you're like 5 years old and you got your, I don't know, first Kiss record or Beatles or whatever it was. Where did you get your start?
Uh, well, I
Music.
was about 6 years old, and we lived in Elmira, New York. And my father uh, had a drum set that was in the eaves of this. You walk up these stairs in this landing, and then there's these eaves, like kind of like an attic, but this little area. And he took out this 1950s blue oyster pearl like color, like Beatles style Gretsch drum set. I had no idea what I was playing at the time, but so he got it out and set it up for my older brother, I think was the intent. He showed no interest. So my dad set it up on this landing. There's actually a painting. My dad's an artist, and he painted me sitting at this drum kit on this landing when I was probably about 6 or 7, something like that.
Mhm.
So he set it up, and I immediately was drawn to the drum set. And then I go to school and I run home and run up onto this landing and just start playing. And then he tried to teach me, which I wouldn't have at all for some
Yeah.
reason. When your dad tries to teach you,
Yeah,
he's,
yeah,
he's trying to show me traditional grip or whatever. I said, just give me the sticks. I want to hit stuff
yeah.
and have fun. And I was really excited about the sound. Um, and then, so I would just play. I never, it wasn't any lessons or anything. I would just creatively play the drums. Little did I know that that was really the initial spark for me of, I don't know anymore from that time period moving forward what it's like not to play drums.
Right.
They've been part of my everyday life. And I appreciate and thank my father for being a drummer and getting the drums out. I don't know if I would have been drawn to another instrument in school and all that stuff. I always played drums.
Right.
And so I'm very appreciative of that, my parents being supportive of that. So then we moved to York, Pennsylvania,
Right.
where you live.
Right.
And my parents, my dad's father had a farm that we moved into so my dad could be an art educator at York College. And then my mom had just become a registered nurse and was working at York Hospital. So we lived in York. I think I was 8 years old when we moved there.
Hmm.
And they got me another drum set because I wanted a new one. And I started taking lessons
Yeah,
from
because
Dave Hershey in
Dave
York.
Hershey,
Yeah, in
he,
York.
he
He
just
was the guy
closed.
to take from.
He still teaches, I think.
Yeah, he does. I think
Yeah.
you're right.
Yeah, he still teaches. He just closed his store about a year or so ago.
Wow.
But he's still teaching. So he's like in York, Pennsylvania. He is the OG.
Yeah.
He is
He
the
was
guy that he's one of two people that everybody talks about. And
he
Don
was
Fry, Don
so
Fry was the other
great to
guy
me
that.
and encouraging.
Hmm.
So my dad was like, you want lessons since you won't let me teach you or whatever.
You need to.
So I started taking lessons from Dave Hershey, and just mainly on snare drum, but I always had this drum set.
Right.
So
So okay. So what kind of stuff did Dave Hershey start you with?
snare drum reading, like
Hmm.
rudiments, and I stood there at a snare drum, and to my left was this drum set.
Right.
I want to be over there. Why
Right.
don't we start here? And I'm
Yeah.
like, but that kid who was just in here was sitting at that drum set.
Yeah. What about
But
me?
you have to work up to that. And I'm
Uh,
like, okay. So I would practice as best I could.
yeah. Yeah. It's like a gatekeeping kind of thing. Yeah.
And so we went through drum, the Podemsky, these standard stick
Yeah.
control stuff, standard drum books, and it was effective for me because I learned how to read. But luckily, I had a drum set at home because
Hmm.
when I started doing drumming in school, it was a drum pad.
Right.
And I was like, wait a second, I've only known a drum set. What's
Right.
this? I probably would not have stuck with it had I just played on a pad or a snare drum
Mhm.
to start with. I had this thing, and I had my dad's record collection, jazz records.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, I would sit there. He gave me like old Chicago records.
Danny
Danny Seraphine, I
Seraphine.
think, is the
Yeah.
drummer that I think that's how you say his name. I would just sit down and play. So my dad set me up with headphones, a turntable, his record collection, and I'm taking drum lessons. So I was just immersed in an imaginary world on this farm, um, of being, I wanted to be in a band. And you were talking about what got me into, playing drums really was my dad's record collection was Herbie Hancock's Headhunters, the album cover.
Okay.
Just the intensity of I'm just holding it. I'm like, and then I hear boom, 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 boom. And I just like, this is cool. So I started jamming to that. And then
So here's a
I'm
question for you. In
I'm
those
going
early,
through my process. And I was in third grade at the time. I remember this in it was a school, York, New Salem, and they had a um, show and tell.
yeah.
This kid, this bigger kid or whatever, I was kind of like, who is this kid? And he brings in Kiss Alive, double album.
Okay.
And they have a turntable in the back. He thought, you talk about what you brought in. He brought this Kiss Alive. I'm like, what
Hmm.
the hell is that?
Right.
And then after the show and tell part, you get to hang out in the class, and we had a little turntable. They'd have them with little speakers, and he put it on. He goes, listen to this. And he puts on Hotter Than Hell live. And I was
Mhm.
like, oh my God, what is this?
Yes.
And I went home and I told my dad, I said, I want to buy a Kiss record.
And he said, no
He had
way.
this record store guy in York that he would buy all his jazz records for. And he took me in and said, hey, my son, you know, wants to buy a Kiss record. So, so he goes through it. The one that was just came out was Rock and Roll Over.
That
And
was my first record I ever purchased. And my
so that was mine.
Yeah, yeah. We don't know this. We don't know this about each other. We that's the very first record because my parents wouldn't let me near Kiss for years, and then when they finally relented, they relented because of some sort of thing some sort of um thing they had at the Unitarian Church that says if you don't let your kids have a life, they're going to have a life that you don't know about. So that was some sort
Oh,
of
that's good.
parent teaching, some sort of that they went to, and it's like, okay, so you're going to do this. We know it's going to change you in horrible ways, but we're going to be there for you like it's going to change you and all the sniffing glue and all this business. None of it happened, but that was the beginning of it all. That album.
Yeah, and we brought it home, and I sat there with both my parents, and we listened to side one, then flipped it over and listened to side two, and going back and listening to the lyrics. My parents didn't say anything.
My,
They
my
said,
my my mom, she tried the Kiss thing before. The guy at the end of the street had all the Kiss records, gave me a whole stack of them. She took one album and then she started writing things down of all the naughty double entendres that went right over my head.
I think my parents either they were just like whatever, or weren't really paying attention on
Right.
that. Because when I go back and listen to that, but I will say this, that is where I I think I really got into playing drums because I was playing along to records. I wasn't really learning how to play drum set. So I would put on records, Kiss records, Chicago records, Aerosmith records, and become another drummer in their band. I didn't learn what they were learning. I
That
just
that was my
jammed with this band as
that
if
was my
I was
question.
another member.
Yeah, yeah. Like when you're listening to Herbie Hancock, did you absolutely nail that bass drum pattern, or did you just kind of play something that went along with it?
I played something and went along with it. I always look at it as I'm dancing along to this music. Like people put on music and they dance, right? But
Right.
I had drumsticks in my hand and I just felt what it was.
Hmm.
Uh, so I would, that's what, and it would be so much fun for me. And then I'd have this music stand that, those little metal, thin, silver, like metal
Yeah.
music stands that had 3 legs. And
Hmm.
if you held it right, it looked like a flying V. You put the one side in between your leg and the other, and then the end looked like a headstock on a guitar. So I would get that and turn up the music and pretend I was a guitar player, Ace Frehley in
Right.
the band. And of course, my dad or my brother would bust in on me. I'm like, wow, pretending I'm in the band. And
Like you got caught doing something you
yeah,
shouldn't have.
yeah. But I was just like letting loose because I didn't have a neighborhood or whatever. I was just had music, and I
Right.
had, I don't know, I just fantasy. It was like, wow, this is so cool to be in a band, and you could get these posters, and I'd hang them up on my wall, and that was my world. Um, And luckily, my parents were really
Supportive of
supportive
it.
of that until I became a teenager and had some money. And then I just wanted to buy records. And then I'm like hiding them in my car and running them in, what'd you spend your money on? And I was like, bring them inside like I was doing something bad. It was so
Right. Right.
funny. These records. Bob and I from Guided by Voices talk about that sometimes. We're like,
Yeah.
you spend all your money on these records and you feel bad or shame about it. But it was what made us,
I still
you
have
know,
them all.
yeah.
I
Well,
do.
I have Kiss Alive somewhere, and I just wore that out. I just played it all the time. And I remember, I think the turning point for me, I must have been 10, something like that. And I was just playing along to side 4 of Kiss Alive, where they do Black Diamond and
Hmm.
Cold Gin, and the drum solo happens. And I come downstairs after doing it. I said, Mom, I know what I want to be. I want to be a rock
That's
star.
gotta be
I want to be a rock star like Peter Criss.
that's what I wanted too. It's like because I think and this sounds sacrilegious to say, but to our generation, and a lot of people aren't going to admit to this, but they like for somebody who was 10 years old in 1968, they were the Beatles of our generation. No, I love the Beatles, and I'm not taking anything away, but I wasn't alive for Ed Sullivan.
Right.
Here we got guys that are like superheroes because you're still 10 years old. It's got that superhero thing. Plus, it sounded really great and over the top to a 10
I
year
mean,
old.
Hotter Than Hell into Firehouse on side 1 of Kiss Alive was one of the greatest. I would listen to that over and over again, and something about it.
The 100,000 years. That was that the drum.
Yes. Yeah, that's it. On side 4, it's 100,000 years. And then, I this thing happened to me where I was like, I'm connecting with this. I don't know if people have that or not,
Yeah,
but
well,
that's where I'm like,
people of our
thankfully, my
generation.
dad had a drum
Yeah,
set.
you try to. Yeah, that's what you need. Yeah. So okay. So when
And
was
I didn't have, as you see behind me, School of Rock. I didn't have
yes?
that. We didn't have anything like that. All you had was maybe a friend in band who plays trumpet or something. I
Yeah.
remember my dad had a marching snare drum,
Hmm.
and I had my friend over, bring your trumpet, and we marched around our driveway like we were in a band together.
Yeah. Yeah. So when was okay? So you had high school. Then you went through all the schooling programs and did all that.
I
When
did
was the?
jazz band.
Yep.
I in middle and junior high school, I did the concert bands and jazz band, marching band. I did every kind of music thing I think that I could do. I just did it because I'm this drummer.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
never thought of
That's
it
your
any
person.
differently. I never
That is
thought I
your.
needed to choose another instrument or anything.
Yeah. 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 So when was the first time you like got together with people and started a band?
I would say that was Joel Menchie, who runs Menchie Music. I met him at the same Unitarian Society where you went.
Yep.
In the 4th grade, we were, and we became friends. And I would say, well, he started learning guitar.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he could play Eruption by Van Halen and all. He
In
started
fourth
playing guitar a
grade.
lot.
In fourth
And
grade.
no, not in 4th grade.
I
I
was
met
gonna
him in 4th grade,
say,
but it was when we were like teenagers. We're
right.
like, let's get a band together. So, and he would come out to my farm. We'd ride motorcycles and go-karts. And
Yeah.
so we started, my dad had moved my drum set. My parents moved my drum set out of the bedroom because I was just playing all the time,
Right.
and people would be coming over, I'd be playing. And they moved me into the barn.
Okay.
Luckily, we had a barn, a place to put me.
Yeah.
And
Hopefully there's heat in the barn.
there was like this kerosene heater thing
I,
my dad
I
had, like, because he
I've
was
done
in
that
Florida.
too. I've done that too.
And
Lunar
so
life.
I would turn that on in the winter, or whatever. But he built a drum riser for me.
Okay.
Like my dad, because he was a carpenter,
Yeah.
architect. So built this drum riser. So Joel and I decided let's start a band. And we called it Dead End because I lived at the end of a dead end. We had a sign. So we
Mm,
took the signs down and put them in the barn. I think they might even still be in my parents' barn.
yeah.
And we started a band called Dead End. And it was myself, Danny Daniel,
Okay.
Joel, and I think Bob Sipe was the bass
Okay.
player,
All right.
who was my brother's friend at the time, but he
Uh-huh.
was into so.
Yeah. So that was yeah, so that was when I first saw you playing in the band, it was with Bobby Campbell, Bob Sipe.
That was our Joy Division band where we
Yeah.
discovered this eerie, weird
Yeah.
post-punk band, Joy Division, and we thought it
Right.
was so like
So when
evil.
did you get into that music? So we went from Kiss to Joy Division. So that was a that was a jump. So Herbie Hancock, Kiss, Joy Division.
So Joel and Danny Daniel and them, they were, that was the thing, like access to music. Like now you can go on Spotify,
Right,
you
right.
can find anything. We in York, we had the radio station,
Music Merchant.
Scorpions, whatever was playing on a local radio station,
Right,
you
right.
could do. But so we go to the record store. I think somebody went to Europe on a vacation and came back with U2's War at the
Okay.
time. And so here I'm hearing this different sound of U2. And then Keith Dowling, do you know him? He
No.
was like a runner, because I used to run cross country and stuff, and we met through running. But he was a guitar player, and he was in that band with Bob Sipe.
Okay.
And what was the other guy's?
Bobby Campbell.
Bobby Campbell. He was in that band, and he's the one who turned me on to some of the stuff. He played like a semi-hollow body guitar. It's like,
Mhm.
who is this guy? And he could play
Yeah.
like really well. And he was into the Smiths. So Danny Daniel brings home this U2 record. I hear the Smiths from this other band, and then they're like, and then I think it was Bobby Campbell that brought in or Sipe. Somebody brought in the Joy Division
Well,
stuff.
that's probably Bobby Campbell because Bobby
I was
Campbell,
like,
he has all that was his Mission of Burma,
yes.
Joy Division, the Stranglers.
I had no idea
he
what it
was.
was.
He was like 20 years ahead of everybody else.
So he turned us on to this
Yeah.
music. And
Yeah.
I was like, what is this stuff? And then so that got me into the Smiths, REM, U2, all this post-punk kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And we started playing, and that's when I like alternative music. And then The Cure, I started falling into like this alternative music that I really connected with.
Right.
And all these bands were bands, like U2 was a band.
Mhm.
So I would like, that's really when it started to take shape that I wanted to be in a band. I really wanted to be in a band. And the guys from Live had a band called Public Affection, and I knew Patrick Dahlheimer because in high school I went to, we were ambassadors for York or whatever, and went to Europe together
Okay.
at jazz
He
band
was, he
stuff.
was a
He
bass
was the
player.
bass player.
Yeah.
And then
So
I knew
it
Joe
wasn't
Taylor.
until 2024 that I played with him,
Wow.
or 2000, maybe 23. But it's
Wow.
only in the last year that I've played with him. It was
Patrick's
wonderful.
a great bass player.
Yeah, he
Great
is.
guy. So I have photos of us like in London on this bridge and stuff. So, and they were kind of doing a band with Chad Taylor, and Chad Taylor was playing keyboards in a band I had for a little bit. I don't know why. And then Woody, forget his last name, they had a band when they were called Public Affection, they had another guitar player.
Okay.
Woody Jackson, that's his name. So
Okay.
Woody was really great. And he and I connected on this alternative thing. So he was also part of this kind of like these bands that were happening, like I had
Mhm.
with Bobby Campbell and Dead End with Joel.
Hmm.
And
Were
we
those
would
two
have
bands
parties.
infecting? Did you have both bands happening at once, or?
I think they were kind of happening at similar times.
Yeah.
And the one with, it was called Jonas Grumby was the name of the band after the skipper on Gilligan's Island,
Okay.
that Keith Dowling. Like, so I was meeting all these really unique and interesting people, we were runners. So, oh, you're normal running. And then you're like, well, wait, who is this person really?
Right.
And then
Right.
you find out through the music they're listening to.
Right. Right.
And in Spring Grove and in York, and finding this alternative music was really, now I look back on it, was kind of like a gift and something that probably wouldn't have happened
Yeah.
in most places. So I felt really lucky that way, and to be playing with these people. Of course, then, we're teenagers and they're coming up to the farm and dabbling in things that you shouldn't be dabbling in. And my parents find out, and then it's like we get in trouble and
Hmm.
can't have the band for a while. You get grounded. But then when my parents would go away, my older brother, who I like to have parties, we'd have parties at the farm, and we'd like Dead End played with Joel and everything, and we'd open a barn door up and we'd be playing and people would be,
All over the countryside, you could hear you from all the way to Spring
we
Grove.
would set out outside, you could hear it through the valley or
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever. It was trying to be, uh,
Man, well, you're manifesting what you wanted to be.
I wanted to be that, and we
Yeah.
made every attempt at making it, even though we had no idea what we were doing. Let's set up. We got a PA system. Let's set up outside like we're
So you're
playing
lucky
Us
in that.
Festival.
Yeah, you're lucky in that you had a PA system.
When my grandmother passed away, when I was a senior in high school, there was some money
Okay.
that was given to us. And my mom said, what do you want to do with it? I said, I want to buy a PA system. So we went to Menchie Music and bought a crate PA system at the
Okay.
time. And that's where it got started.
Right. Right.
Like,
Did you go? Okay, so when you graduated from high school, did you go? You went to York College first?
when I graduated from high school, I had gone to Berklee College of Music's 5-week summer program,
Same here.
and then came back, and that's when I wasn't sure what I was going to do. So I took a year and went to York College to take a lot of the courses, like music theory, English course, some of the basic classes that you would
The
need
stuff
to
you don't
get
need to be taken in Boston.
Right, as stuff I could get out of the way that I could use for credit towards a bachelor's degree potentially in music. And then I
Yeah.
applied to Berklee, got in. So I took a year in York, going to York College, learning as much as I can, taking proper drum lessons from a drum instructor and learning how to read better.
Now, who was teaching? Who was teaching there?
I cannot remember his name.
I would
but
have thought Dave Hershey would be the guy at York College, and
it
I'm
was
probably
not him. It was another drum set guy, and we worked on Rush.
okay. Okay, cool. Okay, so
And I
that
was like, "What?"
you came in at you came in at a good spot, because when I was at York College, they wouldn't let me touch a guitar pick. It's
Just classical.
yeah.
You got your guitar picks on your fingers.
Yeah, yeah. It's like all your nylon string. It's only classical music. You're not allowed to do anything else. It was not. There was no. Yeah. So kids nowadays don't understand the stuff we had to go through to learn our craft.
Right. And in that year I was at York College, I'm trying to find people to do a band. I was just all I wanted,
Yeah.
my dream. And since I was probably discovered Kiss 6, 8 years old, I want to be in a band.
Right.
It's like this.
Now, who are your
Everything.
who are your drum influences as you're like in this part of your life?
Now?
You had Peter Criss. You had Peter Criss when you were 8.
Yeah, Peter Criss was like a kind of Peter Criss and Animal from the Muppets.
Right.
were
Everybody
maybe
quotes
one of the-
animal as no. Honestly, he's a spirit animal.
He's
He's got the
why
spirit.
When you're on stage, the excitement of being a drummer.
He's got the spirit.
Yeah,
It's essential.
He exudes the enthusiasm, what drumming is.
Yeah, yeah.
And I connected with that. Peter Criss, Joey Kramer with Aerosmith,
Okay.
Phil Rudd from AC/DC.
Okay.
I would listen to all this AC/DC stuff because he could do it. But when I was a teenager, Joel Menchie's younger brother, this is where a turning point happened. We go over to his house and we're listening to Van Halen.
Okay.
But they have a drum set set up. He sits down and plays note for note. I'm like, why are you doing that? He's already doing that. This is what I would do. And I played something completely different. And then I realized, oh, that's what people do. They learn what that drummer's actually doing, note for note.
Yeah.
So that's when I started to do that, and like AC/DC, and I started to do learning how to play the actual part that they were playing. And we started to do that in dead end. I'm
Yeah.
literally trying to learn how they're playing.
Yeah.
Now I get it, but I also developed this creativity while playing with other people that I carry with me today.
Yeah. I was you
That
say
I have.
both approaches are valid. Like
Um,
both approaches are valid. I guess. In other words,
Yeah, so then when I got to Berklee or went to the summer camp, I learned music notation. And that was a gift to me to start listening to records, writing down music notation, learning it. And then that led me into, oh, I can pretty much learn any drummer's part now because I can write it out and then practice what that is and build up to that. And I have this thing and then put it to memory. And that essentially I had a studio career in New York and stuff. People would hire me, either replace a drummer, play drums, but I could write out notation so I was an efficient studio drummer in the studio. So I could
right.
write it out, read it, play it, and then really become that part.
Yeah. 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 So, you finally did go to Berkeley.
I did, which was
Okay. So how long did you stay?
I graduated.
Oh, good. Okay. So I didn't.
I took one
You're
semester
smart.
off.
You're so, you're
Well, I
smart.
remember, well, so Rod and I didn't know each other in York,
Yeah.
but
A little bit. Yeah.
we knew of each other from stuff, but we didn't really know each other. And
Right.
then the second semester I was at Berkeley, we became, or no, the second year at Berkeley, we became roommates,
Right. Right. Yep. I remember
which was awesome.
Roy Hargrove, and I remember all the bands that you were in, and he was
Oh yeah,
he was part of that.
Roy Hargrove was there. Abe Laboriel Jr. was there.
Yeah.
Uh, Jimmy Garrison's son from the bass player for Coltrane's was
Yeah.
there.
Matthew Garrison. Yep.
Yeah, Matthew, and we
Paula,
could go
Paula
see
Cole.
them. Yeah,
Uh, Donny
uh,
Hathaway's daughter, Layla.
correct. Paula Cole was there. Jay Belrose, plays for Robert Plant now, and
Okay.
I used to practice my drums with him behind me in one of those
Cubicle.
sealed
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
cubicles that we had at the end of our
The
uh,
shed. The
yeah,
shed.
yeah.
So okay. So now, what you get out of Berkeley? What was good about it, and or what
Um,
what was the general consensus? Like you finished it, so it was all right.
well, I understood, like, I should probably get a degree. This was the only thing. I was a springboard diver. It's in school. I was offered some scholarship somewhere. I'm like, what am I going to do with that?
Right.
So I was like, I don't know what I want to do, except I only want to be in a band. Luckily, I got into Berkeley because when I went to that summer program, it was like being in college. And I was like, oh, wow, this is something I'm actually doing really well at in a school setting. So
Yeah.
I had a lot of energy, as you can see. I was, and I lived on a farm, so you're outside. In a classroom setting was challenging for me to
Mm.
focus sometimes. But with music, I had no problem.
Right.
So I was like, this makes sense to me. And then to be alone, I was used to being alone from being on the farm.
Hmm.
So practicing in having to go set up my drums to use a rehearsal shed for 2 hours, tear them down, wasn't that much work to me because I used to have to mow the yard. I had to do a lot of physical stuff. So I was kind of like, this works for me, and I did really well there. So when I was in college practicing, I knew I had to do it. And I knew all these other people were, having the college experience or whatever. But I understood that this is really the thing.
So
I
that thing that you
want.
find easy is that other people find hard is the thing that you focused on.
I
Like,
guess so. And then
yeah.
I met people that were in, like, my friend Jason Ruck. Oh no, the 5-week program. There's a person named Paul Trudeau I met in the line getting our thing, our IDs, and he was from Providence, Rhode Island, and he was in this coolest band, I thought. Coat of Arms from Providence. And he goes, "Oh, you got to come see our band." And I went and saw him. I was like, it was like REM, The Replacements, and all these bands. I was like,
Yeah.
wow, he's in a real band. And they're playing their own music in Providence. And we would go get tickets. This is the first time I could ever go to any concert I wanted to. We saw the Smiths. I saw the Moody Blues with the Fix. This all the summer before I went to Berklee.
Mhm.
And I met him. And then through that, I met these other people that were doing music, but doing their own thing as an original band.
Right,
I was like,
right, right.
that's what I want. I don't want to be in a cover band or a
Right.
wedding. I want to be in something that's going to make a mark somehow, that's their
Yep.
own thing, the creative part. And so when I came back to Berklee to start going to school, I met this guy, Jason Ruck, who was um, from Massachusetts. And he had a friend that was with him and they had a band. So we started a band together.
Which band was that?
I'm trying to remember. We were called, and it was with Jeff Rohrbach, who was on keyboards, and Andy, who played drums, who looked just like Paul McCartney.
Oh, I remember him. Is that sorry, Atomic Cafe?
This was before Atomic Cafe.
Okay.
And I forget what we were called at the
I
time.
remember
But
Andy was it Andy the bass player?
yeah,
Used
he
to
was
transcribe-
Paul McCartney.
He looked like Paul McCartney and he was transcribing and he smiled like Paul McCartney and he had a
Yeah. He
was.
all day long, he was Paul McCartney. He had a Hofner bass, I think, or a bass
Right.
similar. He would just transcribe every Beatles song,
Right.
the bass line.
Yes.
So he was in our band for a minute, and we did some gigs at some colleges. Like I think we went down to Brown University and did a gig. And Kevin Siegfried, who's now a composer, his brother Brett, I started a band with called Horseheads, which had Tony Fuentes was the singer. And he was from DC.
Tony, I wrote my first song with Tony.
There you go.
Yeah.
So we had a band called Horseheads for a minute. We tried to play around town.
Do you know where he's at now?
He moved to Washington State.
Okay.
He went to Harvard's political science program.
Okay, so he got out of it.
And he got into some kind of public policy
Okay.
role in Washington State. And I think
Okay.
that's what he's doing. So he left music and everything and
Yeah.
that.
First song I ever wrote. First song I ever wrote.
What was that song called?
You.
Wow. And we had the 4 tracks, right? You probably 4-tracked it.
Yeah, yeah. He recorded it.
Yeah.
And I had the lyrics and he sang a melody with my lyrics.
Wow.
Because I'm not a singer. Wasn't then.
And I remember
More so now.
his 4-track was some mics in those sheds.
Right.
And that was the
We
first
recorded in the dorm room, even though we weren't supposed to do that. Because I'm a rebel.
You are.
So when you graduated, you start getting into like, okay, what happens after graduation?
So in college, like one of the things great about Berklee, they had recording and production people program, and those students had to do sound alike. So they had to get a band together to do the sound alike. So I remember working in the studios at Berklee. They had like 4 of them, professional studios. And we did Get Back by the Beatles. And we had to learn it exactly note for note, which brings me back to that. I had to learn how to write it out and then play exactly like Ringo
Right.
Starr as best I could. So they had to make it sound like that audio wise. And we had to make it sound like that as a band. And
Right.
that's where I really got like, oh, I like this being in the studio. And I met a student named Rich Costi, who's now probably one of the biggest mixing engineers and producer. He produced Muse. He mixes, if you look up Rich Costi, he has a whole list of artists he worked with. Fiona Apple, he recorded. He worked with Rick Rubin, told him he had ears of gold. So he recorded and produced Audio Slave. He's just a phenomenal engineer, but he was my friend. We were friends, and he was a guitar student, but music production. So when I graduated Berklee, I get a phone call from him. He's recording with this band, and there's a violinist named Joan Wasser. And she goes, "Oh, Rich, we're looking for a drummer." I'm in a band called the Dambuilders, and we're looking for a drummer. So he called me and told me, oh, there's this really cool band in town called the Dambuilders, and they need a drummer. And it was right up my alley
Right,
of
right,
this
right. Yeah,
instrumental music, unique sound. There's a violinist, all this stuff. And I was like, what? So this was 1991, the summer of 1991, when I met my wife, who I'm still married to. We're going to be married 28 years tomorrow.
that's wonderful.
Um, so she's been with me my whole career, but I had met her that summer, and then she was moving to England. I didn't think I'd ever see her again. And then I got into the Dam Builders at that time, and they were going to Europe, and they had a East Coast tour lined up to try to get signed. And I was like, oh my, and so right out of college, Rich connects me with the Dam Builders. I start playing with them, and the rest is essentially all about relationships. People I met at Berklee, people I met on the road, led me to where I am now, to be able to be an educator at School of Rock,
Yeah,
to
yeah.
be guided by voices, playing drums. I'm 56 years old.
Right.
Be able to play drums as if I tell people I was that 6 or 8 year old. I'm able to do that when I get on the stage. So I'm able to connect with that person, that child, uh, within.
So,
And
yeah.
it's all become from, those connections I had after Berklee.
So that needs to be said that a lot of times you get the gig also. It's like your abilities as part of it, but just being a cool hang matters.
I would say that's 75% of
The cool hang.
do you connect with these people? Because how long you playing? We play Guided by Voices plays 2.5 hours or so,
Right.
but how many more hours are there in a day? So you want to make sure
Oh yeah, yeah.
um, the friendship. I will say this lineup of Guided by Voices with Mark Shue, Doug Gillard, Bobby Bear Jr., and Bob and myself, we're all friends first.
Yeah.
And so it's like a family. It's the dream band. It's
Right.
what you're looking for in friends and everything. And Bob put us together, and we've been this lineup. It's the longest I've ever been in the band with the same people. And we're on our 8th or 9th year
Yeah.
of doing this.
So
And
those of you who don't know Guided by Voices, and I've learned since I've been in your world again. I've done some research. I listened to it, and they were the ultimate indie band who we're gonna write our songs and we're gonna be ourselves no matter what, even if it means we don't play. Our songs are going to be our songs, and we're going to produce them our own way. We're going to create the artwork for the records, and it's like they were kind of Dayton, Ohio's. This is how we do it ourselves. Do it yourself kind of thing, and it's like, and eventually their triumph story is they went to a new city, and they were treated like heroes because not Dayton, Ohio is not was not. They had a certain thing in your. It was about playing in your hometown doesn't respect you as much as the outside town does, but the New York they hit New York, and it was like, okay, the world needs this. So tons of albums. It's like lots of songs on every album, and it's like you're one of I don't know how many drummers there. You're the second drummer, third drummer,
oh no, I'm like the
10th.
fourth or fifth drummer.
Okay, but you've been with them as long as any of them
Yeah, I've been with it.
because a couple
So the
different
Dam Builders
occasions.
played in Boston in 1993 at this place near the Boston Garden at the time, and Guided by Voices was opening for us. And
Who's
Bob,
okay?
so the Dam Builders were playing, and Guided by Voices is opening up, and everyone's like, "Oh, this band Guided by Voices is, you got to check this out."
Yeah,
So we get there, and whenever Bob is like, has this magazine, he was recently telling me this. Remember that time? And he opens it up. It's like alternative press or something. He goes, us opening for you, this isn't going to be happening anymore. Let's check this out. And it was a whole article on the record Vampire on Titus, I think. And sure enough, he was right. And they were great. And I got to meet him. And the next day they were like, we have to go home. I have to teach. So I met him in 1993. Then I was in a band called Those Bastard Souls, which is a member of the Grifters who Bob was friends with. And we opened up for Guided by Voices during the Do the Collapse tour. And that's where I really got to know Bob. And I'll just continue on to this. Then about 2001, I was playing drums for this artist, Leona Ness, and literally putting on headphones, playing along to a click track. Didn't matter what I was doing. I decided I'm going to hang it up. I'm
Yeah.
tired of hustling as a drummer and was going to go to culinary school, got into Johnson and Wales, and then we're getting ready to move. I was comfortable with, I'm not going to be a professional drummer anymore. And I get a call from Guided by Voices management. Bob and the guys are recording a record in Akron, Ohio, and he wants you to call him at the studio. He would like you to possibly talk about joining the band. So I called Bob, talked to him, and he's like, I want you to join the band. I'm like, what? And I said, I need to call you back. So I called my wife. I was like, you're not going to believe this.
I heard this story. She is a dream.
I go, you're not going to believe this. I just talked to Guided by Voices, Bob. They want me to join the band. I don't have to move to Dayton, Ohio, and I don't have to audition because all this stuff. And she goes, well, that's a no-brainer. I said, thank you. Called him back, and he's. I said, yeah, I'm in. So that changed my life. So it's from 2001 to now. Bob, it's a gift to me to play drums because I was ready to stop.
Right,
like,
right.
okay with it. And then when Guided by Voices ended the first time, when he brought it to an end in 2004, 2005, that New Year's Eve was the last of it.
Yeah.
That's when I got involved with School of Rock.
Yeah.
And then Bob brought me back into the band in 2013 when Kevin Fennell, unfortunately, was no longer playing with the band.
Yeah.
And I played with the classic lineup of Guided by Voices, which was awesome. And I did that for about 9 months, and then Bob brought that to an end. And then I did solo records and stuff with him. And then he formed this version of Guided by Voices. And the second time he asked me to come into the band, I wasn't doing much. And I went for a walk around this park. I was like, something has to happen for me today. And I was talking to School of Rock, but I was like, something has to happen in my mind. Bob calls me. And he asked me to be
You gotta get the band back together.
I call Bridget, and I call him back. I said, I'm good. He goes, who says no? I said, I know. I would never say no to this. This is a gift to me. So Bob is essentially, and he's like me. He was writing songs when he was 6 years old or whatever. All his entire life. He learned how to do something. And I feel like this band of people, and I had this image. We were getting ready to go on stage in Pittsburgh. And I told the bass player, I was looking at us, we were like, have a great show. And we were these kids. All of a sudden, an image of us being like 8-year-old kids together, going on stage, we're going to go do it. You know, and then we go on, we're older, but I told Bob, Guided by Voices to me.
You still have that animal spirit.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
We all do.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, stay with that. Stay with that. That keeps you young. Music education. So School of Rock. So you as a drum teacher, you do all kinds of stuff that lots of drum teachers don't do, or you're not. Do you bring the animal into your drum?
Oh yes. Yeah. Well, I didn't realize I could teach until I started. A friend asked me, "Hey, he was the one who got the job at School of Rock," and he goes, "I need a sub because I'm going on tour. Do you teach?" I said, "I'd love to try it. I think I'd be fun." And then so I started teaching, and I realized, oh wow, this is kind of awesome. And I had studied with Joe Morello. I was coming out into New Jersey probably about 1998, something like that. And that changed my life of how to play drums. So I learned from Joe Morello some basic things that really helped me to become a teacher. So I started to teach all these things that I had wished I had done as a kid. Like, how do you hold the sticks right? How do you make it bounce on the drum and then control that bounce? And then how do you play where you get into each thing you're playing? You're not just executing something. You become, as I say, you become that part. You become, even if it's a simple single stroke roll, become it. Put your whole self into that. Be present into that. So my teaching isn't just up here. You must commit yourself fully
to the dance
to get the reward of what you're doing, and it will give back to you. So I try to really inspire students. It's not necessarily, we're going to do this week. Then we're going to do this next week. My whole thing is find out who you are as a musician. You're going to learn how to play like these people, but we're going to also work on being creative. So I'm trying to tie all that together. I love to teach, and I love to teach students, young students. When I get an advanced student who, that might be better than me, I always take them back and throw them into something like there's Joe Morello has this exercise called the table of time, where you start out with quarter notes. It's one measure each from one hit up to 12 hits in one
Okay.
measure
Right.
per beat, one
Right.
hit per beat up to 12. And you have to be really relaxed and focused, and you're going in from ones to fives to sevens, odd time, but you
Right.
play it as a flow. So I'll put them on that, and then that humbles them a lot, because
Yeah.
we always have to go back to that, right? I know you're the same way.
Uh-huh.
I don't know anything. I always feel like I'm always starting over, always. And I feel like
Every day
that's
is a
the joy.
new learning chain.
But that's the joy of being a
Yeah.
drummer and an educator, is to show that we're doing that at the
Yeah.
same time.
So you
Um,
offering drum like people with special needs, and so that whole thing that you're talking about, that you have to put your whole body into it. When I went to Millersville, and they talked about eurythmics, and that's exactly what that is. And we knew what it was. We didn't know there was a name for it.
right.
Okay. So what the degree got me was I was able to put a name on a thing that if you're not doing that, it's not happening. The body motion, movement, how movement and execution. That's so to me it all starts with the rhythm and the movement and the animal.
Yeah.
And then you can attach all the other things onto that. So if you have no sense of this, then you can't play in time at all.
Well, and I've also worked with like artists and singers who are like, oh, I don't, like we talk about a metronome and timekeeping. And um, there was this amazing drummer at Berklee. His name was Jim Black. He still plays. He's an avant-garde jazz player. I took one lesson with him because he was so crazy on the drums. And he's like,
Mhm.
you just got to keep this. This is all the pulse, whatever. We play around it. We do all these things. So I would be working with some singers, and well, I'd sing around the beat or whatever. I said, well, you need to know what you're singing around, I think. So I took that as like, everybody needs to use a metronome, singers,
Mhm.
everybody, but make it your friend, not this thing that controls you,
Right.
and move with it. And so I put a lot of emphasis on everybody. Like here at School of Rock, one of the big things we do is, how do you play together? Well, you had to play in time together. So can you count together? And the answer is, first I start getting them, can we count to 4 over and over together?
Right.
Okay, we can do this, then we can play together. If you can say it, you can play it.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
started putting all this together, and then, but my whole thing is the spirit of each individual. Like I'll work with some students that on different spectrums, autism, whatever it might be, and the joy they bring me from their knowledge.
Right, right.
And we
Enthusiasm.
learn, but, and this is what I love about teaching, is the giving and the taking of inspiration. And I have that also with Guided by Voices. I feel like we're in a cycle of inspiration where Bob writes his albums and his songs, and then we record them, and we're inspired by his writing, and then he's inspired by what we do, and it keeps going. And I feel like everything's in a circle. We play a song, we play rhythms, keep that circle going. It's not angular like this.
Right, right,
It's a
right.
circle. So, and there's a center, but you can go right to the center sometimes, the bullseye, or you can be outside of it. But as long as you're aware of all these things, I feel like that's where music comes from. And Al Jackson Jr., one of my favorite drummers, who unfortunately passed away very young,
Hmm.
um, played on all the Stax record stuff,
Yeah, yeah,
Otis
yeah. Booker T and the MGs.
hit hard, but his feel and just what he brings to that. And Jim Keltner, these drummers that have this certain
Do you
feel.
introduce these drummers to your students?
Yes.
Do they know that they know like I always say, learn the names of the people you're stealing from.
Well, I mean, I mean, as you could say,
We're
imagine
borrowing. We're borrowing.
rock.
Everybody learns that way, so it's not. I don't
When
feel
you're talking about John Bonham as the greatest
right.
rock drummer of all
Right.
time, and Phil Rudd, these where they play simple, and then you got John Bonham who's doing these crazy things, but he was self-taught, a lot of them.
Right.
And I always try to get
But the
students
thing,
to
yeah.
see who they are so that they can then, and I try to teach them so they can eventually teach themselves
Right.
through their hearing and become them as a unique drummer. I'm not trying to make drummers be like me or whatever. I'm just showing them techniques that
Right.
then you're going to use that as your own voice. And that's why we teach a lot of creativity at School of
Right.
Rock.
Okay. Yeah. That's that. Yeah. Okay. So drawing, how important is drawing from varied sources, like style wise?
Very.
Okay.
Um, dynamics is a huge thing. So I mean, I'm in Guided by Voices, we're playing full bore or whatever, but we also can bring it down.
Right.
But I've also played with artists quietly, and the feeling of like when you're barely moving, but you're
Right.
making sounds. So that's one of the things a lot of drummers will play in this dynamic range of this. I try to get them to go as wide as
Right.
possible.
Right.
Be as quiet. No, can you be even quieter? And that requires you to be relaxed in a different way. But to
Right.
be louder, you still need to be relaxed and learn different techniques like the molar technique, the whip, to
Right.
really get the hit without hurting yourself. So there's all these things. It's a sport. Playing
Right.
drums, playing instruments is also like a sport. It requires fine motor skills and then large motor skills, especially
Right.
with drum and movement. If you're moving on stage, it's the same thing. So I always connect it to trying to show a student, look beyond just these sounds, the music notation and whatever. Become it. And I was just recording with Guided by Voices, and we were in studio. This is last week,
Okay.
and we're learning together this, we're recording to Bob's demo, whatever the way we record. And I said, okay, guys, I like to capture drumming when I'm found my thing and it's captured right then. So I'm becoming the song. I said, we're going to become the song and we're going to be in this moment. Let's all be in this song and then express it for what we're hearing and what we're doing without anything else. It's being in the present moment.
Right.
And that's been a challenge or something I've been trying to put on myself is I'm doing this right now. And I'm going to put my all into this and try not to think about anything else and see what happens. And we became the song. And I went in to listen to the playback. I was like, I would never be able to just, write this out or whatever. It's because we were
There's so
all
much
working
that's
together.
into it that's not notatable. Not
And Bob's demos and the way he plays guitar and all that stuff speaks to me and speaks to us.
right.
So I think awareness and listening
Do
is an
you
important
do
thing
you
I've
ever
been
do you ever play in the same room with the guys?
Yes, that's what we were doing. So
Okay,
we
that's
were in the
wonderful.
same
I
room.
never knew.
Yeah.
Because I know you.
Sometimes we do it remotely, but I'll just do the
Yeah.
drums and then we can do it in any which way. But
Yeah.
for this last session last week, it was Bob wasn't there because he'll do his vocals and he might add guitar later, but 'cause he's in Dayton, Ohio. So we were able to get together with our producer in Brooklyn and we're working together. And we've been playing live. So the other thing I noticed, like when you're playing live, students might notice this too. And I always, after about, we've been a band, after about 3 years or something happened where we're not connecting on our, it's a metaphysical thing. I
Spiritual.
know a way, a certain movement or whatever. So when we were recording, I noticed because we've been doing shows, we brought that live movement of unspeakable things. We
Right.
just know what's happening, connection into the studio, and you feel it. That's incredible, man.
Right. Right. So you guys are you're on the road throughout the year, on and
Yeah,
off.
we do weekends, usually from the spring until end of October or something like that.
Okay. Yeah. So guided by voices. What I appreciate about you, and is every band I've ever heard you with, the band sounded good. And it's like one of the
Wow.
things that well, I'm serious though. and it's like, in other words, it put in my head that if you don't have a good drummer, you don't have a good band.
Well,
And
Bob
it's
says
like,
this is
and it has
humbling to
nothing to
me.
do, for me, it had nothing to do with the rush. Even the rush is cool because it gets you to play the fancy stuff. You satisfy all the nuance and the groove and the louds and the softs that aren't as noticeable to, I think, everybody, but I noticed it. So for what
Well, I really appreciate that. I mean, that's I'm flattered, and we've known each other a long time, and to be recognized for that stuff, that's what I really put into. I'm putting my whole self into the stuff, and you don't notice little nuances. But Bob said, and it's very humbling to me. He's like, man, you own a band is only as good as they have to have a great drummer. They're only as good as their drummer. And I'm like, wow. So he's kind of saying,
yeah,
uh,
yeah, he
giving me a
is.
compliment in a way, and I don't know how to take that, but I was like, I'm so honored to be
Consider
able to play at my level now. I'm a better drummer now than I ever was. And I think that's come from wisdom, right? There's something great about getting older. You
right.
bring all of your learning experiences with you, and you express that through the music. So I always tell people, as we age, it's like a wine, right? Or something that ages is a good thing. It's great for music too. It's
Absolutely.
because we are expressing our lives. If we're in touch with that, we're
Yeah.
expressing the emotions of that through our instruments. And drums have, my mom said, yeah, you seem like you're in a bad mood or something. Why don't you go play your drums? And I always relate that. I'll tell kids that, man, when you're, just go play the drums, let it out, express yourself, write
Yeah.
songs, whatever that might be.
That stuff is therapy. It is. It's completely
It
therapy.
is.
It got me through COVID. It got me through, like, the reason I own a house is because I have drum sets. That's no lie. The reason I did not sell the house is because you can't play drums in an apartment or a condo.
You're absolutely right.
You
I'm
know,
lucky to have
like,
School of Rock here because we have drums here, and there's a studio I work at in town where my drums seem to be right now. But we have a house too, and I was set up in the basement during COVID,
right.
and I recorded a record. It's not them. It couldn't be them. It is them in our basement. All the drums.
Yes. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for this. And yeah, keep doing what you're doing. This is cool.
You too, Rod. I mean, you're an inspiration. I love what you're doing in York.
Yep.
Love around there. I'm
Yep.
so glad you're still doing music. It's
Hmm.
so cool.
Yep.
Um, Honored to know you.
Yeah. Thank you. See you.